do your business there, and you can do business with us.
Yeah, Andy Jumbo's good plan.
Well, sorry, I guess you do one or two things.
Okay.
Mylar's right here.
Okay, and are we on the mic right yet?
Yep, you're on.
Yeah, okay. So, first, let's bring the meeting to order. And the first order of business, so we can get the applicants out the door, is to sign the other Mylar that they brought in. So thank you for doing that. So for those who were here last time, we can sign this. I have one, and then Mr. Fool was kind enough to attach another one.
Good job.
Yep. That's his, just so you know.
Sign it in the same order we signed the other one.
Yes, I agree. Okay, take this.
So you signed it first, Peter.
Okay. Have a paperweight.
I signed it last, so I can sign last.
Sure.
I can do that. I'll turn it over first. Doesn't have lettering underneath it, otherwise it looks kind of weird. I'm sorry about static.
Yeah, really. So it was you
So
and
you,
I.
yeah, you sign on top.
Okay.
You're probably gonna have.
Come down. Sorry. I think we should put today's date, is that correct?
Should you or should you do?
I would.
Would you?
Today's the
So
day
it
you
was just
signed
three
it.
of us at the meeting last time.
Yeah.
I looked at the wrong, so I should have signed second, but, so it's Roger. I guess it doesn't matter.
It's okay.
So in terms of date, I don't know.
Because we're doing the business today, we approved it on that day. What we
Right,
could
but
do
we got
is,
one Mylar
Make a
with
note that it was
3/1
approved then and-
18 date on it.
yeah, so if we said, put the 3/1 date on it, but then next to it, put today's date with our initials, my initials.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? That way
Yeah,
it's-
that way we're covered.
Yep.
So call me next week.
Your neighbor to be,
I don't think it's an issue.
your neighbor to be stopped Rich, myself, and another neighbor down the road were all chewing the fat at the side of the road.
Right, yeah,
The other guy
yeah.
had his car
Huh?
on the side of the road with his lights flashing. He stopped to make sure we didn't have a broken down car.
I'll go down to Boston, beginning of April.
Okay, so
We'll
we have
look
two
at it.
Mylars,
You go to
right?
again?
One for us, one
Huh?
for
You have it done again?
the county.
choice.
right? Yeah. And then paper. And we could sign, actually probably sign that too.
I would suggest they take the one that was signed on March 1st, because it's going to ask the fewest questions that they asked about that.
Right, so me, George, Roger. So then on this, we can sign up me, George, Roger. Does it sound agreeable to you guys? then?
Yep.
That was the original one. We're gonna sign both of these.
Probably should. Just
Probably should, yeah, that way, everything's all the same.
Back there again?
Yep.
We're only three of you at the last meeting? Yep.
I'm gonna put,
Were you in Florida? Yeah, I flew down and drove back with my brother, who's been down there for January and February.
Yeah, some of us are glutton for punishment. We like the cold.
You're gonna sign the other one too?
Oh,
See, what
sure,
do
I
we do?
will.
We get back,
I'll do it all right together.
just before the first big snowstorm.
How long did it take you to drive back?
Day and a half. We actually, we left.
For the warden service?
Day, I said day, we left 2 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday.
She's
Got
switching
back here.
Yeah, she
I
did.
probably got back in before the meeting.
Oh, it's all right.
But not much more before that, because it
Yeah.
was like 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I was gonna go down and
You took turns driving?
pardon me?
Took turns driving?
Yeah.
I just, the reason I asked is I
Stopped
had
at
to
my
call the
sister's
warden
house in
service
Clubhouse for
about a week ago because they hit a deer in front of our property.
Oh.
And,
Well,
I just
going through the
wanted
Pocono was
to-
a little bit out of your way, was it?
Well,
Take
it
it,
was,
you
but
know, not
we
take
were
it,
gonna
but
stay
whether
the
somebody
night on
wanted
the way
it.
down, and then we
The
left.
guy
It
from,
It was
zoo
snowing
over
down
in
through
Oh, yeah,
the
sure.
we decided
Got
to
it for an
not bother down west to
Is your
her
daughter
place, so
at the
we
academy?
just kept heading
Yeah,
down.
yep,
Oh, so you drove down as well?
yep, she's.
Drove down, then I flew
got
back,
6 weeks
Oh,
now.
oh, okay.
and then I
Yep.
flew down
Great.
and
She's
drove
been
back,
going
but
through a lot of
he
school.
basically
It
wants
was
somebody to help drive.
18 weeks with
It's
the
actually getting to
basic
the point
training
where I'm
and
not
then
sure
12
he
weeks
finds
at
his
boarding
way
school. And she was a warden for a while.
Oh, okay. How old is he?
78.
She's gonna be out of the
He'd probably
winter
find his way,
China.
but he's not very good
But she
at
can
driving,
still live at
especially
home.
at night.
Whereas
Oh,
the
yeah.
boarding service had her down in
So
San
we went fishing
And she
on the
couldn't-
party boat or
She
something.
was working 4 days down
He's been
there,
down
paying
there for
rent
a
down
month.
there, and then coming home for 2.
And we go down in the morning,
Jeez.
he's driving,
But he didn't end
he
up
missed
in
his turn.
Then
TW, who knows where, up north somewhere.
Yeah, you
I
got
was
to
sitting on the third.
Yeah, right.
get down.
A lot of times they start them out and most for no place.
They had her under
Yeah.
the forks.
Wow.
Oh, in the forks?
Originally.
Some days not
And then
gonna be able to do it.
Refugees Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, she's down
They
there
had
with her
an opening
husband,
in
husband passed
Sanford,
away,
so
you
she
know.
thought that would be better down
Mother
there,
went
so
down
at least
south.
there was more people around. So
And mother came back.
Can't afford to live down there.
Right.
You know.
No.
she's like, I might as well work at McDonald's because I'm paying my rent.
They, you know, they approach a stop sign,
She didn't make it on Northwoods Lawn,
then he
did
slowed
she?
down, right? And she accelerated going. Stop sign, forward intersection.
We're all set?
So I believe we're all set. We've
There's a
got,
stop sign you
we
went
have
through.
all Mylar
I don't know who's that.
She said,
This is.
yeah, I know.
So we got our Mylar right here.
Yep. We have our Mylar.
And that Betty might not be
Is that all
public,
the town
you know,
needs? Is
in
that
the- in the ladies.
That's all we need right here.
So, let's do a quick check through what we actually need.
Yeah.
Just to make sure we have everything.
Make sure we don't take 3 tries.
Right. Gary, does that make sense that we keep just one Mylar? Just, we need a paper? I was trying to get to that page before we
Actually,
left.
I think you do.
Subdivision.
Oh, right, yeah. One has to go to the tax assessor.
Submission. 2 reproducible, transparent, 1 to be recorded on the
Figure out who ran into the pump yet? Right?
and 3
Figure out who
copies
ran
of
into
one
the pump yet?
of one or more
Yeah, I think
maps
so.
or drawings drawn to scale of not more than 1.
What happened?
Yeah, no, it's just-
So one-
Yeah.
George said it was
Alright, good.
1,800 gallons.
So I think we are all squared away. Thank you so much.
Oh, down there.
Thanks for your patience with
Thank
us.
you, not a
This
problem.
is, when we were there, just now.
Yeah.
Did you notice
Good
the
luck.
big
Don't see you later, Gary.
container thing?
See ya.
Full of snow.
Have a good night.
About the road, I'll check with.
That was over by next to the old bank.
Yeah.
Call me anytime.
Yeah, what's that going on there?
They're picking up snow, that's full
Yeah.
of gas.
Full of gas, yeah.
Oh,
The
Oh.
pump, they hit the pump and it didn't shut off or whatever after, and this was what, 4 o'clock in the morning?
I don't know, actually, I only found out about it today.
I heard it was 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever, it must have been.
That's when it got
pumping.
reported,
Oh,
Was
so
around
before that.
2:30,
I
3
saw
o'clock.
that yesterday and I went down to Damon's Quick Stop on Civic Center Drive.
Yeah.
I pulled in and the first gas pump laid right over. Somebody hit that one too. But that one didn't leak. They never shut the
Yeah,
store down.
yeah, because they're built with a crash valve
Yeah,
that's supposed to go off, and
Right.
theirs didn't.
2 out of 3 went off.
so how many gallons did they lose?
1800's the latest estimate I saw from DEP.
It's a lot.
Well, it's lucky the ground's frozen because I told McCaskill about the story you told me about how back was the early 80s or late 70s when their underground tank leaked and it contaminated the well for the town office.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, it did? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I came across a record of that once. Well, it's all in the same
Good thing it
manner.
was traffic gain that held it front.
But anyway, the ground frozen, it shouldn't be at risk.
Yeah, they don't even know who hit it?
I think they figured it out.
Oh, they do.
It was on camera, I guess.
Yeah,
Although
signs
those
say
those
that.
cameras are terrible for really. You see these things on TV, and if you can identify this guy, call so and so.
I know, and it's all blurry.
It could be my brother, and I wouldn't know who that was.
Yeah, and they usually have a hood
Oh, hoodie.
or hoodie.
Get a hoodie.
Well, thanks everybody for coming in tonight. Really glad to see a full house. First order of business before we get into the shoreline zoning discussion really is to review the minutes from February 15th. Nick, thank you for sending those out. Does everybody have them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Take a minute to go through those. Everybody else set? So what do we have for edits or comments?
I got a couple.
Sure.
I would suggest under an old business, Paris Manson. First of all, I guess I just noticed it. I guess that's Manson, not Mansion, right?
Yes.
Is that how it? Okay.
Good point.
Second sentence on, it's actually first line, but second sentence, they all agreed that they need to, I think the words better would be review, because we didn't conclude that we need to approve it. We concluded that we need to review that application. It's there.
So change from approve to review.
Yeah. Obviously, if they're going to have a permit, we need to approve it, but we just need to review it. I would also suggest, since I know George mentioned this at the meeting before, and I know I mentioned it at the last meeting, I think it'd be good to have some kind of note in there or a sentence, and I'd suggest that after the third bullet, kind of a new paragraph, if you will. There was discussion with Mr. Manson regarding the need to address phosphorus control, which may be accomplished with a vegetative buffer. To get that, I'm afraid they're going to come back next time and not having addressed it at all, and then say, well, we talked about it, and we don't remember that, but we clearly talked about that in both meetings. Number 2, shoreline discussion. First sentence, the board started the discussion off with them looking over the draft. I would suggest putting stormwater language in there. Put in the word stormwater language that George did. And then second sentence from the bottom before the bullets, the board needs to see if I'd suggest changing that to the current values, to see if the current values are correct. This is talking about the moderate high value wetlands maps, which we're not confident that the current values are. And then down at the bullets, I would suggest adopt draft language for stormwater runoff. I think that's what that was supposed to address. And then for wetlands, I'd add wetlands districting. And perennial, just a typo, where it says perennial. And then the last bullet, it's the non-conforming structure section. If you just add structures, instead of use, put structures. That's the section that's a little confusing. I guess that's it for me.
Thanks, Rich. Anybody else? Anything? Roger? Nope. No? George?
No, I wasn't at that meeting, so I'll be
okay.
abstaining anyway, but no, Rich got what I've had.
Okay. Great. Nothing else? I had something in mind. I lost it though. Oh, I did. It's a follow-up question, not an edit, so let's get through this first. So if nothing else, I would entertain a motion on the.
Motion to accept the minutes of February 15th as amended.
Second.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained. So a follow-up question relative to this, hopefully we can get into this a little bit later after we do the other discussion. But I wanted to thank you, Rich, for taking the time out of your day to go down to the property, hoof around on it, see what's going on, get a real good look at it, even though it's snow covered, really to get a feel, and also reporting back. So I read the email that you had written, so thank you very much for doing that.
You wouldn't want to go walk it right now, would you?
No, it was actually, I pretty much stayed up on the crust, a lot of it last time, but right now would not be good enough.
Yeah,
Give us the snowshoes.
Yeah, so that was good. And also in the next one, we had said that Rich, you were going to come in here and compare some stuff.
I did.
So thank you for doing that too.
Yeah.
So
let me say, I think we'll have to address that tonight with some discussion, I guess, because anyway, well, I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later. But. Yeah,
I think we can get into it when we start doing our thing, but I just want to thank you for doing that. It's going to be real important for our discussion, I believe. So thanks. So we're at the point now for our continuing old businesses, the shoreline zoning ordinance discussion. We have we've enumerated these things: adopting draft language for the stormwater runoff. And I think George had drafted up something, if I'm not mistaken, previously. We have wetlands, perennial stream discussion, and then non-conforming structures use, non-conforming structures section of the ordinance to clarify that area. And then, if there's something else.
Well, something else that came up when we were reviewing the marina down in the village was, and Rich had made a suggestion for a change to the shoreline zoning ordinance to address it, was the deal with the minimum lot size issue in the and possibly change it in the village or the limited commercial district.
Yeah, you did mention that, yeah.
It's true, good point. So that's
The other thing we really haven't talked about yet too, and that one's gonna take some thought.
Right, yeah, but we shouldn't lose sight of it.
Yeah, the other thing is the standards down in the village about setbacks that we were told was not really legal.
The waiver thing?
Yeah. We'll have to come up with some language there too.
I forgot all about that one.
And the other one we can talk about, I don't know whether anybody wants to get into it at all, but remember back about 3 or 4 months ago, a fellow came in and was complaining about the, what do you call them, kind of vacation home. The guy that was down
Yeah.
in the village there.
It's Clyde
where-
Fowler's house on Lake Shore Drive.
Yeah, he
B&Bs.
brought in all kinds of people,
Yeah,
and
the
I know we
B&Bs.
can't address noise and things like that, but I think at the time we possibly said something about part of the issue was parking and whether we can kind of in the rentals or whatever make sure there's adequate parking. I think that was part of the problem. They were parking over in the beach, and whether or not we want to do anything, I don't
Well,
know.
we shot down the parking ordinance, and as far as I'm concerned, if the town manager wanted to do anything with parking, they could just present an ordinance of no parking on town properties after 9 p.m. unless an event requires those, and then we could take care of it. We don't have to write a big ordinance in a shoreline zoning for parking.
If we did anything, it would just be in that, if we don't really have a rental section, so I'm not sure where
Yeah.
we put it anyway. I'm not.
Well, and you may recall there was also discussion about to what extent, at what point does it trigger the commercial development review ordinance? Because in that case, if I recall correctly, the owner wasn't living there, and it was being rented for, or at least the allegation was it was being rented for wedding venues and bachelor parties and things like that. And at some point, you become a commercial establishment, and you're not a residence anymore.
Roger, you're signed up to go to that training on
Next month, yep.
Airbnbs.
Got MMA.
So maybe they'll talk about it there, right?
Dennis is going, Roger's going, I think I'm going.
Well, yeah, if you guys talk about that, that would be great feedback, I think, if possible. So yeah, some food for thought, Rich.
Gary, has that
Yeah, I'm
been
not-
a continuing issue with complaints from the neighbors? And there was a lawsuit too, right? But that was something different.
That's something different. Truthfully, that's the only piece of property that I've had complaints about, or the town has had complaints about.
Right.
So one piece of property, but it was several complaints, wasn't it?
And was that the catalyst for Dennis's effort to put forward a parking ordinance that went nowhere before the select board?
I don't know.
I think it had to do with.
That's what he was using. He was saying he had 30 complaints about parking and implying that it was down on Main Street. Well, the 30 complaints in parking he didn't really even have. It was the recreational board was sitting there talking about it, and there was one complaint. So it was kind of a shady deal trying to get it through anyways. So it was a bunch of them just bitching at the recreational department meeting. And that's where all the complaints come out of. But majority was about that. And he said that he couldn't do anything about it because he didn't have a parking ordinance, but he wanted to go for him and Mike Barrett wanted to go for the whole town rather than trying to take care of the problem
property.
and addressing the town properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
You could,
Well,
he could have taken care
last
of
summer
it if
I
he
did go
wanted
down
to.
there to go swimming. There wasn't a single parking space available, and there wasn't anybody at the beach. I don't know where those cars were from, but
Yeah, so you can address that by doing something with town properties,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and I have no issues with that.
Okay. So is it, I think it's probably time to move on to our discussions for the topics that we need to address. Does anybody have a feel for what we might be able to accomplish relatively, I don't want to say easily.
Well, only judging by the minutes from the meeting that I missed, it sounded like the stormwater was ready for a vote.
It seemed like it because we had, those of us who were here, we read what you had drafted before. And
If that's the case, I would say knock that off and move on to the more
yeah,
contentious issues.
yeah. So that was so. Have people seen that? I mean, it may not be fresh in everybody's mind.
Nick provided us with copies.
Perfect. Thank you. So,
So can you just refresh what the changes are?
so what was originally there was not underlined, and so what was added is now underlined, and it looks a little bit less dark, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
And so these things are added there. And it goes on to the second page as well, on the back page. And so does that help kind of give you a frame of reference for what's been added?
So it's going to require an engineer over 30,000 square feet, which is a big project, which is fine.
Right. This is exactly the same as in the commercial development review ordinance.
Yeah, it's the same kind of threshold. Below, you do this, above, you do this.
So in the below 30,000 square feet, where did this language come from? I guess. We're on number one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So where did that language come up?
Which A?
The 1A, and then with the less than 30,000.
From the I cut and pasted from the commercial development review ordinance.
For smaller residential projects, you mean?
Yep.
Oh well, that I modified for the purpose here in terms of so it wasn't just commercial.
So rather than saying for smaller commercial projects, I think what we're saying is we said for smaller residential projects, right? Pete, does that help answer that question?
So, all right, so it says best management practices for stormwater may also be found in the Department of Environmental Protection publication, conservation practices for homeowners, and is also available on request from the town office. So I guess what does the publication conservation practices for homeowners got to say?
It's the ones that we've been attaching to permits now.
That's the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're being
So it's no change
consistent.
really. It's just that it's you guys had asked me the first time we reviewed it to add some citations where people could get additional information. That's why the note was added.
Okay. All right. Would it make sense that where it's the first time we're putting it in, we'll do a parentheses right after for homeowners, beginning in parentheses, something to the extent we've been using this historically for a while or whatever, because it's it jumps out like it's something new, and someone's reading this, we don't have a definition for it any place, in the definitions, maybe we kind of clarify, something about we've been using it right along, or something like that, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting suggestion. I hadn't thought about the need to do that.
I'm just thinking for people who read this for the first time, or the second time, or the third time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's one of those, user-friendly type of things.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to it, Pete. If you think you can come up with like a little snippet to put in there that would be user friendly and helpful,
So, okay, what would you say, say again, George, what, we've been using it for what? All along? I wasn't aware of it.
Oh, well, this is where we got the handout that we, when we put a condition on a permit, they use DEP best management practices for stormwater. What gets attached comes from that homeowner's manual. And so probably, you know, really, if the message that you want to convey to the public is that these are the
We go one outside?
What's that?
Can you go outside in the office and get one?
it's a whole series.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Pete. It sounds like what you'd like to do is say that by a person reading this, that they would then know that this is consistent, that we've been doing all along, or something along those lines.
Okay.
Again, is that kind of close to what you want?
Yeah, it is, and I just, you know, just need some clarification.
Pass that down. Just double sign it.
So,
You're gonna put something in there, it certainly ought to be just a note and not part of the
Yeah.
actual.
Right, yeah, right. Should be at the end of that note, maybe.
How about I just, you know, say, practices for homeowners, beginning of parentheses, exhibit in the town office entitled Drip Line Trench.
Well, it's more than that. You gotta, it's the whole, that's only
Yeah.
one of them.
But it's all right here in the attachments that we have listed, isn't it?
It is?
Yeah.
yeah. I think-
So these
which is
attachments-
good.
Why don't we just add something like, this is consistent with the planning board's past practices?
Yeah.
That sounds good. Pete,
Okay.
I think George had an idea that would maybe go along with what you're saying.
Either this is, or these are consistent with the planning board's past practice.
Okay.
Because you want to convey that this isn't anything entirely new.
Right, yeah.
Right. So if this could help meet that concern and be clear for the users, then.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that'll be fine. Yeah.
It's almost like we should have this in commercial development too, like for the boat business. How much ground did he disturb it?
Good question.
Yeah.
Kennebec boat repair. huh?
Oh, we have this language in the commercial development.
In the now commercial development, maybe.
So this should be the same.
Oh, you meant back
Yeah.
prior to the most recent amendments. Oh, yeah.
But it's the good thing we have it now.
So people take these?
Yep, they can ask for it, and I hand out one with those conditions that George talked about.
Yeah, okay. So you're reprinting them quite often.
I don't think I've handed out one for a little bit, 'cause I think we've.
What?
I don't think I've handed out one in a little bit, but maybe 2 months ago I gave out one.
And I just want to get a feel for it. So in the past year, how many you think you've given up?
Since we got them,
Yeah.
I would say roughly, I would say probably 2 a month.
2 a month? 3 months? Okay. Good.
Around there.
Thank you. Anything on page 2? If we're okay to move on to page
I would think we were, it seems like we all agreed that this was
Yeah,
the
I'm
most part. Last
fine
time
with
we
it.
met when George wasn't here.
Yep.
I just figured,
2. I didn't have any other questions. Pete had the suggestion tonight, and I think we addressed it, if that's okay.
Yep, fine.
Anything else about what has been drafted? If not, I would entertain a motion regarding the draft language for stormwater runoff management standard.
I make a motion that we accept the January 2018 draft stormwater runoff management standard as proposed,
As proposed or as now amended?
as now amended, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So we have that. Second. Any more discussion? Thank you very much for the work on this. Really appreciate it. All those in favor?
Rich second.
Rich second. Correct. Knock one off. Next in order, I don't know if this is the way we want to go, is to talk about wetlands. Do we want to talk about that one, or the perennial stream one, or anything else?
Just ready to jump right into it.
Want to do
Might as well do
wetlands?
the wetlands.
Let's do it.
Just background here. The state guidelines for zoning freshwater wetlands, these are 10-acre non-forested wetlands, was that if it's rated moderate or high value by inland fisheries and wildlife, that the town was to put those wetlands in resource protection.
So when did that all happen?
That
What
was
year?
back in 1989, and it's been in our ordinance since 1989. The most recent version, the updated guidelines that we're now working with, does not require moderate and high value wetlands to be kept in resource protection. I went and talked with Keel Kemper, Fish and Wildlife, and I asked them, is the science still, because back when in '89 when we put these in, Fish and Wildlife was adamant that needed a 250-foot buffer around those the wading bird and waterfowl habitats is what they are. Need 250 feet. They said that really it should be 330. But shoreline zoning is only 250, so we can't extend it beyond that. I asked him if the science was, they still back it based on science, and he said yes.
So
And-
what's in the new guidelines is political?
Yes, yeah, well, it was a political kind of thing with the new administration.
Newest administration when?
What's that?
New administration when?
The LePage administration.
Okay.
Pull back all the regs or whatever. So I told him that we had, currently we're reviewing the ordinance and we're deciding what to do with our wetlands. First of all, in looking at Belgrade's rated wetlands, which I have here, we only have 2 that were rated high. And Keel implied that the ones that are high. But he acknowledged that there's a bunch of, we'll put it this way, the moderate value wetlands, when they go out, and a lot of these ratings were done through aerial photography and stuff, not on the ground, that a lot of that, when they actually go out on the ground, they find that numerous moderates get dropped down to low. And he indicated to me that if we had certain wetlands that are rated moderate, that he would be willing to come out and do site visits with members of the plan, whether it doesn't have to be the whole board by any stretch of imagination, but he would go out and look at these wetlands and do field ratings of them, so that we would be, if we were planning on keeping moderate value wetlands in resource protection, that we know that they were correct ratings, that we're not, see, there's numerous ratings right now that are, we got a bunch of moderates, but they may not be. They, when you go on the versus looking at from an aerial photograph versus going to the site and seeing it, they may fall off. And so, let me first say there's 3 things we can do. Legally, we can drop all the moderates and high values, and give them another district, not keep them resource protection. We could take the high ones and keep in resource protection and drop the moderates because they're not, right now, they're subject to some iffiness.
Okay.
Or we could have Gene was his predecessor,
Yeah.
Gene Dumont.
Good.
He'll come out, ask him to come out, he said he would, look at them and do on-site ratings and keep the ones that end up moderate as resource protection, and the ones that fall off the moderate scale too low, you drop off and not regulate those as resource protection. Let me show you the ones.
Rich, did he say if there was a specific obviously not now, but season? I mean, does he have to be there during the bird nesting season?
No, it's springtime. Looking at the vegetation and amount of water versus dry areas and stuff.
Right.
He said he could do it in the spring if we wanted him to. Right now, the northern part of Belgrade, the only one, these are the ratings of the various ones. And some of these aren't 10 acres. If I get the town zoning map, I could figure out which ones are 10 acres or not. If they're not 10 acres, they're not going to have a district around them at all. But the only one that shows in North Belgrade that's not a non-rated, if it's non-rated, that is going to, it's basically probably less than the low-rated one. The only one is the bog up at the.
And that's moderate.
Yes, that's moderate right now.
That's the North Bay?
Yes,
Yeah.
I figured that would probably be a high, but and I know around the edge of it, it's not all that great, but you know, it's more the stream that really has that habitat that you.
The stream that comes in from North Pond?
Yeah, Great Meadow
Yeah,
Stream.
Great Meadow Stream. But that's the only moderate up there. Then we get down the lower part of town, and we have a high. We have two highs, I guess. 62. See, they define 62 and 63. They're two high ones, but they're basically the same. That's the complex down at Hammond Lumber. And then there's over on Long Pond, there's a little one right here, number 53.
Oh yeah.
That's, no, not 53.
That has
12, I'm sorry, 12. That is rated high. But those are the only high rated ones we have in town, are really this one wetland, which they call 2, because it's got a stream running through it, and this one here.
So the Hoyt Brook wetland doesn't qualify?
Right here. Those are rated as moderates, I believe. See, I would look at that as one big wetland. I wouldn't look at that as 3 small parcels.
Well, and I'm also a little surprised knowing how much wild rice is back there.
Yeah. And 64 and 65 are rated moderate. I'm not even sure they're 10 acres. If I get the town zoning map that I think Nick has, we'll be able to figure that out.
64 and 65, where's that?
That's down at...
The stream?
No. It's across from... This is 27 coming down. 27 right there. It's
Cross
remember there was
Agnes.
near where there's a beaver dam built a couple of years ago?
What lake are we on?
I know David.
Snow
down
Pond?
by
Snow
Twitter.
Pond.
Yeah, so
It's down past Gagny's, isn't it?
Yeah,
Towards-
down
Yeah.
Gagny's on the right, back in there somewhere. I've never been in there, but there's 2, I think they might be small ponds or something.
Well, aren't they associated with those kettle hole ponds back there?
I think so.
Yeah.
I suspect that they may not even be 10 acres, and therefore they wouldn't need to
so the
even
one
be on the map.
up here, you say, in Long Pond, on
Great. This is Long Pond.
yeah,
Lower Long
whereabouts in Long Pond? Where's the dam?
Pond. Dam's down here. That's
Okay.
in Mount Vernon, Rome.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
Vernon,
So
not Vernon.
so where's this? This is Ingram Stream or something? Where's it?
Yeah, it's over here. Ingham Stream would be over here somewhere.
Yeah, it's on this side of the pond. But it looks like it's in that hill district, isn't it? On the, I mean, the way that
Is this
hill looks
Green
like.
Island right here, you think, Rich?
probably, yes.
So there's a wetland in there? It's all rocks in
Yeah,
there?
there's a stream that outlets there. If I'm in the right. No, wait a minute. That's up here.
Yeah.
Okay, then I don't know where that is.
It's somewhere in the lower end of,
What road's this?
that's the Dunn Road, maybe?
I was just trying to get us sort of close to.
Oh, you know what? We might be able to better tell on this bigger map, Rich. I brought one of those beginning with habitat maps. Actually, you got the little version there. Let me see that for a second.
I think it's the Penny Road. No.
It's Old South Church, right?
Yeah, so it comes down. What the heck road is it?
See, I thought it was this little wetland up here that has, I think, an endangered species living in it. But that's obviously not the case.
Should be right around there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's right in here somewhere.
Oh, right. See, because this beginning with habitat
That
map.
is Penny Road, isn't it?
I have the big version that I got from Inland Fish and Wildlife. By the way, I'm going to leave this for the board because this is an update from the 2014 one that we already have.
Thank
Wait a
you.
minute, the other number's up here.
Right, yeah.
So the town line.
So that's behind Gingy.
That's Penny Road.
Okay.
I thought it
That
was
is
going to be
Penny
this
Road,
one
yeah.
right here.
You're right,
So-
that is Penny Road. Okay.
Must be this one.
Because this is where Gingy
It
is,
must be because Rich's map.
the old Route 27.
Rich's map sees the end of Belgrade, right? Right in here in Mount Vernon, Belgrade, and then are we here?
Yeah,
Or are we?
that's an inland wading bird, waterfowl wading bird.
That is Penny Road.
So this is the Dunn Road right here. This is here's the road that goes down to Sandy Cove,
Yep.
and
Is that the end of Sandy Cove Road?
Looks like it. Doesn't
looks like it. Yeah. So this is this is the outlet of a stream that cuts across. It starts on where's the Timber Point Road? It must be the Timber Point Road right here. It cuts across my property and it meanders all the way. It goes through Jack Sutton's property, and this is Jack Sutton's land, by the way.
Yep.
Jack and Katie
He
Sutton's
owns right
property.
up to the end of Sandy
Yeah,
Cove.
yeah.
Mhm.
I've fished in there. You know, it's definitely wetland. I don't know what else to tell you.
And that's listed as high or moderate?
Which one are we talking about?
I think this is the high value one that you're.
Number 12 right here.
I think it's
Yeah.
number 12.
By the way, that's not the Penny Road, that's the Dunn, that's
That's
the
the West Road.
Wings Mills Road.
Wings Road,
Because
yes.
here's the Bartlett Road,
Yeah.
Wings Mills, Old South Church up on the corner.
Right.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute.
Are we on
Well,
the same
maybe
spot?
we're way
Or
off.
is it this one?
So you think that's?
This is Penny Road right here.
Yeah, no, it isn't that, right?
So
Here's Wings Mills. Here's the dam, right?
Okay.
The outlet dam.
Is it this one? 'Cause the contour
Is it on?
lines-
Is it associated with the lake, Rich, or is it?
I believe so, because
Because there's one here that isn't.
it's got to be associated with the lake.
I
12.
think Craig
What about
noted.
There's the
51?
Dunn Road.
Well, Craig noted there's some contour lines right there, and
Oh,
Yeah, it's right at the
Right,
base of
so
it. You
here's
got-
that hill,
I think
probably.
it's like I'm guessing it's like this, because the number 12 high value.
That's the hill right there.
That is the hill.
Right
Yeah,
there.
and then south of that hill,
Yeah, but
It's
it,
down slope.
it isn't large like all that wetland that's mostly on the other side of the far.
But this is.
I wonder if it's this.
I don't think so. I think what
No,
he's pointing
it's
to
got to
is-
be associated with the stream. It's got to be a small wetland, right?
So it's got to be part of this complex.
Right. I think what's small about it is that the small part happens to be in Belgrade. The much larger part
Is in Mount Vernon.
Exactly.
Across the line.
I think so.
Yeah, so maybe it's just this section right here, and maybe this whole complex is high value.
I'm thinking that because like Gary was pointing out, here's a hillside on this map. There's that, I think, the same hillside their side. You go down slow and towards the stream, and you're gonna end up in about.
I think you're right,
there.
Peter. I think it's this small portion
make
that's
sense?
in Belgrade.
I believe. Get out of the way, Rich. You can take a look. Pete, you see what it's
I see it.
pointing to?
Yeah.
And it just so happens on this map, which just shows town of Belgrade, which makes sense. You're only going to see a smidgen of it in Belgrade.
So we're only looking to keep the 250-foot buffer. Is that what we're looking to do on the high value and possibly the moderate?
Possibly the moderates. The high value reserves only 2 of them.
And the 250 buffer, what's that? That's no building, but is there access to it? Boardwalk or anything of sorts?
You'd have timber harvesting standards that would have to be adhered to.
You could have access through it.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
not
in all
until
honesty-
you can't go in there.
No.
What about boardwalk?
Yeah, you could do that.
In all honesty, most of these you couldn't build within 250 feet anyway.
Right, that's what I was
You
thinking.
couldn't put a septic system.
But
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I was thinking
It's
too. It's like
access is still gained or can be gained.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
because
the answer
I have
to
a
this question.
boardwalk right here,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful. And it's
It
not
is.
doing any harm. Everything's growing right up around it.
Sure.
I remember Roy Bouchard was on the board at that time, and
Right.
he made sure to investigate that one very issue.
Right.
And I think that met your that desire. So,
And the other thing is if you did have a property that was resource protection and it was high ground, like I said, Gary's, a lot of these things are nothing but forest and swamp.
Some of them you couldn't build there anyway.
If it were dry land and that's the only land you had, you could get a special exception permit,
Right.
build a single family home in that area.
Yeah.
If it would pass
If
the
we're looking
soils
for my
test.
recommendation, I would say we keep the moderate and high, but we have hills we can review them, and there's only about 4 or 5 moderates. I mean, if you take the complexes like the Great Brook, not it shows 3 different wetlands, but it's really one wetland. And
So where are the moderates? Did we cover that yet?
we did.
yes,
Where are they again?
We talked about
It's not very
64
many.
and 65 as being moderate, which are down, like I think Craig mentioned,
Yeah,
sort of beyond Gagney.
Yeah.
and I'm gonna look to see if these are 10 acres.
By Hammond's, there and there. Okay.
Those are 62, 63, which
Yeah.
those are considered high peak.
Yeah.
No, oh yeah, they are high. Those are
62,
high.
63.
Yeah.
But none, like Gary says, none of those places are buildable anyways.
They really aren't. They really aren't.
And if there are buildings there, any grandfathering going
There
on?
aren't any there.
There aren't any.
I'm sure of it.
Okay.
Within 250 feet of what we're talking about?
And obviously, if they got a permit, and the permit was valid, and we changed it, we're really not changing anything. If anything, we're gonna drop things off if we find out
Right.
some of these moderates are not longer
There's
considered
only
moderate.
one house on that, the other side from Hammond anyway. That's the only way they put the garage in right now.
Right.
And that's grandfathered in.
That's grandfather.
Yeah. I just want to make sure, get that clarified. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It isn't even in the floodplain.
Right.
What a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing else on that side for quite a ways.
It'd be up to the old
Oh,
print
there's
shop
one
and that
here.
road down to Hammond just put in.
Right.
But I mean, 250 feet. He's got the railroad tracks down there, and
Exactly, Craig.
I don't see where it's going to bother him any.
So Rich had a
And,
recommendation.
then on the other side, in North Bay, any existing buildings over there? Like I'm just thinking, as the stream comes out of North Pond, if you're looking at it, if you're in North Bay looking up the stream, off to the left, there's a very expensive piece of property over there.
The Imperadors, but
Yeah.
again, 250 feet. They already have their house there.
Yeah.
And
You mentioned it's in the wrong,
Pardon?
isn't that in the wrong town?
That's in Rome also, anyways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's a good point.
I just thinking it through.
So, Rich, could you say your recommendation again? I don't want to.
My recommendation is that we keep the moderates and high values wetlands as resource protection, but we ask Keel Kemper to review the moderates. And if any of them no longer are classified as moderate, that we drop them from resource protection into another appropriate district.
It makes
I like
sense. I like that. One
I
last
like it.
question though. Where I live over by off the Horse Point Road, you know, is that wetland a moderate one, possibly, or not?
Let's see where.
I don't think that'd be 10 acres. So.
Because see where Hatch Cove is?
I know where we're,
know-
oh, here's Hatch Cove.
Yeah, well, let's see where are we here.
Oh, let's get this. 161 is non-rated, 63 is not rated, 62. There would, I don't think some of these are 10 acres and they wouldn't be required to be zoned, but it's not moderate or high value.
Okay, but Skip Hammond's right next door neighbor. If you gotta contend, I don't care one or the other, but you know, just let you know.
It's the reality of the situation. I understand. Yeah, good point.
159? No.
So based on the information that we have here
Oh, that's the one, but I can't.
for the freshwater wetlands rating maps, based on that information, have we addressed the questions that we have had about the certain areas that are either not rated, moderately rated, or high rated, and taking that into account with Rich's recommendation? Are we good?
Yeah. and
So
what's the
if
timetable? You know,
if-
can we fix it, fit it in, the inspection and all that? And
I had the same question.
Yeah, I
wanna
did.
make
That's
sure-
why I asked earlier, what time of year.
Mhm.
Be after the snow ice melt,
Yep.
so to speak, so he can see what's
Mhm.
there.
So,
He said it'd probably take him a couple of days.
okay.
to work.
So just playing this out, and tell me if I'm going down the wrong path, but so say we like this idea, the recommendation we have, and then we say, Keel, please come out and do your thing. So he comes out, April, late April or something. He does his thing, he has to work, then he gets it back to us May or something. How does that affect our timetable to wrap this up, hopefully? We'd have to, if we drop moderates, if there are anything on here that's moderate that then drops off, do we then have to adjust our map? And then that is part of what is voted on. So I'm asking that because of the timetable to bring it to the voters.
When is our current timetable to bring it to the voters?
We're going for next November.
I think November is the most realistic thing we could do. I think June,
Oh, it's already too late for the spring.
yeah. Right.
I do think that if he comes out in April, May or whatever, I can't imagine not having the information and be able to go up to school company with it
Mm-hmm.
and have that modified.
Yeah, it wouldn't take much work, I wouldn't think.
It wouldn't, and the
The
foundation,
communication part of it would be the hardest part.
right, and the foundation has already been modified to the latest data set. So,
Yeah, so that's the heavy lifting.
exactly, which is why we did it. So, Pete, does that help you answer the question? Because, you
it
know,
does.
you
No,
know,
you mentioned November. I thought we were gonna do Florida. I thought we had a September date.
I just soon have it in November when everybody's voting.
Okay.
Well, and the other thing too, realistically, it means we have to have all our work wrapped up sometime in August.
correct. So that we could have it
If you work
Printing,
backwards from
yeah.
the, all the notices and
here.
holding a public informational meeting, holding a public hearing, you need 2 public hearings.
Right.
So I make a motion, we have the moderates, what did you call it? Reevaluated
Yes.
and keep the highs and keep our 250 foot
I'll second
resource
And does that motion, maybe I jumped in too soon, does that motion include keeping the moderates that remain moderate?
Yes.
Based on that?
And I think, so we've had a motion and seconded, and we've had some discussion. I want to make sure I ask a question too. So does that, are we also of the same mindset that we will be asking Keel to come out to do this?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
To
it's clear.
reevaluate.
Right.
I
So-
can give him a buzz tomorrow if we vote on this and tell him, yes, we decided we want you to come out.
Okay.
Come out as soon as you can.
All right. Yeah. So thank you for the motion. The second. Any more discussion on this?
One point, so, you know, wetlands have more values than just for wading birds and waterfowl.
Right.
All right, flood protection, plant life, etc., amphibians, reptiles. But my take on this is, if we take a moderate as based on Keel's evaluation, again, he's going to evaluate it for wading bird and duck habitat only, not all the values that wetlands have. If he recommends dropping one down to less than moderate, it would then be zoned, say, limited residential or whatever it might happen to be. There still would be, in effect, a buffer because new structures would be back, right? And vegetation along it would not be clear cut. So there still would be protection for that wetland. Nobody's going to be filling in those wetlands as a consequence of this decision. So I just wanted to make that point, that it isn't like we're throwing out the baby and the bathwater.
Right.
And plus, some of the areas around these wetlands may stay, portions anyway, in resource protection, even if it's not moderate, if in fact it's a forested wetland that's more than 2 acres. That's the other criteria for resource protection, is if you're in the shoreline zone and you've got an area that's 5 acres of forested wetland, that area is going to be resource protection. Once you get out of the forested wetland and on the upland, then it would go to residential. So.
And associated with that is there are other wildlife species besides wading birds and waterfowl. So, for example, the one wetland I always thought thinking about is this one up here on Long Pond off the Castle Island Road. I mean, that's got an endangered species. That's endangered species habitat. Yet it's not a high value wetland. So it points out that the limited scope of inland fish and wildlife perspective. But it's still protected.
Right.
Less so though.
Right. Yeah, and this is not a criticism, but they have IF&W has a certain lens that they're looking at, and it's through that lens that they're really concerned as a wading bird.
It's interesting. I went to a presentation associated with Trout Unlimited from one of their biologists up in their Bangor office, one of the research biologists. There's actually a great blue heron rookery up in here.
I believe it.
A nesting, not a rookery, a nesting colony.
Yeah.
I got a question here. Yeah, you brought up, you're talking about repeat what you just said now.
About the forested wetland?
Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I could do an example.
But I'm in a forested wetland area. There's a lot of people down right here live having forested wetlands. They want to be able to expand. So they're saying if we put this through, they won't be able to do it.
No, because if we did what we just did, it's going to make it less restrictive, if anything. It's not going to make things more restrictive. But
you're on made land, right?
Oh yeah, so
you've got houses in there already. It's a developed area. There's no way we're going to rezone that for resource protection, even if it were a moderate high value wetland.
Yeah.
Sitting there with the houses there, it's already developed, and that's one of the criteria for not being required to have resource protection if it's.
So you're talking about new development,
right? Areas that are not developed now that might meet this criteria.
Okay, I need to have that clarified. Okay, all right. That was my question, basically.
So we haven't voted yet. So we'll make sure we don't lose that, but I don't wanna lose any discussion or questions either. So did Rich's answer
Yeah.
help address your question?
It does. yeah.
Okay.
My question was gonna be, if we drop the moderates, will that open it up for construction more than it is now?
Right, and I think we now know,
We knew
now by
construction.
talking about it, the answer is that it will not,
I mean, for new construction.
right, because there's still wetlands.
Yep.
Right?
What it would do is we drop if we drop the moderates and don't regulate that as resource protection, people could build it, if it's upland next to it,
Right.
they could build within 75 feet of it. As it is now, they have to be back 250 feet.
Yeah.
It's basically a difference of setback. Are you gonna make keep the 250 foot? Are you lowering it to 70?
And most of them aren't buildable within 2 feet.
Right,
And that's what I
right.
said.
So,
It's wet.
Okay, so are there any other questions about this? I hope we've helped answer questions or concerns people have. Are we ready to vote? I think I am. So all those in favor of the motion that Craig put forward? And, because you, okay.
Alternate.
Thank you. Rich, would you be so kind as to call Keel and request a date with Mr. Colbert at his earliest possible convenience?
Next Tuesday, my visit.
Hey.
Peter, should I leave this map with Gary? Are you the keeper of the other map like this? And you can throw that other one out, because this is replaces it. That one's from 2014. And, I mean, this usually is something we only look at for commercial development review stuff. But when Rich started working on this, we thought it'd be useful to compare the two. And
are we gonna need that for perennial streams?
I don't think so.
What we need, I think what I left in Gary's office, hopefully it's, I think I threw it up on a shelf or something.
Still right there.
So, thank you, thanks very much. Just want to take a minute to apologize to anybody that might be listening to us on the World Wide Web. We're for noise that we may have made, as we are in a more confined spot, and we've had large maps unraveling and raveling right by the speaker. It's not meant to. It's just the way it is. So, in case you were wondering what all the commotion was, it was paper. Yeah, just a shuffle. Next would be, I think, perennial streams, and Rich went to get some important information for us that we can hopefully use for us. Find it. Thanks, Rich.
If we were to, right now, we zone a 75-foot stream protection district. Everywhere you have two perennial streams coming together. Where those two perennial streams meet, the shoreline zoning ordinance has a 75-foot stream protection district.
Currently.
Yes. The black and the yellow are the areas that would be covered with we would be extending the shoreline stream protection district, the 75-foot zone. These would be the areas that would be added to the map. Here we have two perennial streams coming together. They form, right now this is zoned, this is not. What do we have here? That actually
is
Hamilton Pond.
Oh, I know where this is. This is that field, right?
Yeah, this is what was the Minot
Right.
farm field. That
Yep.
this is
Oh,
where
okay.
the road
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
floods.
Yeah, okay. Because this part was perennial, and this is zoned now. This would be added. This is the area Bog Brook, across the 27, goes up into Fish and Wildlife land, and starts right at the spring, what used to be the spring on the West Road.
Yep.
Just
Right at the
below
corner.
J.
Yeah,
Bradshaw
down in that
Place.
dip.
Yeah.
Let me say that the Natural Resources Protection Act, which is administered by DEP, does now have buffer requirements adjacent to these smaller streams. So in some way, we would be adding a double layer of regulation.
That buffer is 25 feet, right?
Yeah, it's
And
25 feet.
then all activity, they regulate all activities within 75 feet.
There's adjacency is what they call it, I think, yeah. And if you wanted to get a permit under that Natural Resources Protection Act, they use that same, for permit by rule, you have to comply with the same point system that we have for the buffering. Gary's familiar with the point system. Need to meet so many points in any 25 by 25 foot area worth of trees.
For clearing.
Yeah, clear. Yeah, basically for cutting.
So what do we have now with where these?
We have
spots-
nothing.
Nothing.
No, we'd be adding this to the ordinance.
It'd be 75 feet
75 foot buffer.
on either side.
Yes.
So what is at the federal level? What we have what now? We just talked about.
At the state level.
This would be. We were talking about the state level.
Yeah.
Which is basically federal.
No, not federal.
No.
I'm not sure the federal.
I
have any
can't
kind-
imagine the Army Corps of Engineers could even find these streams.
Okay, so at the state level. Okay, so at the state level, what's the setback now?
Nothing on these.
Well, yeah, there is a buffer requirement at the state level for construction type stuff.
But nothing at the town level.
No, nothing at
so
the
what's-
town.
so what's the
State
buffer?
level is 25 foot of,
It's 25 feet
With a point system.
on each side of the stream.
yeah, basically make sure they got shading is what it does.
Okay, so we're gonna go and increase it at the local level from 25 feet to increase it to 75 feet.
Well, on the local level, we'd be going from 0 to 75, but if you consider the state, they're at 25.
They're at 25. So we're adding on.
We're
basically
at
another
0 and we'd be adding
Yeah,
75 feet.
50. So we're gonna be getting in, so you're gonna have two entities regulating the same stream.
For a portion of it.
Local and local
and state.
and state. All right. We discussed this before, and where's the funding going to come from at the local level? Because we're going to incur a lot more expense. I didn't put a dollar amount on it, but the time going through this program process. So I can understand the value of doing it, but let's have the money on the table to do something like this. And the town is pressed to balance the budget and come up with a budget. So we're going to be looking at our committee, our group. We're going to be looking forward for a much bigger budget. As to how much, I don't know. Next year.
What additional costs do you foresee? Some additional time on Gary's part. What additional costs for us?
Well, we're going to have to go out, check it out, and do site visits.
Well, that's all free because we donate our time.
Well, I'm not going to be going out running through the woods doing it. How's that? Now you guys can think about what you're going to be doing, and you're going to require the landowners to do spend some money, and more than ever met before if they had to spend before, and then there's going to be some violations, and the code enforcement officer is going to get involved. You're gonna have to get attorneys involved. You're gonna have landowners out there used to getting regulated. So there are gonna be some enforcement issues going on. You gotta think about those things. So if you're gonna do it, you may wanna think about charging a premium, increasing the premium, the application rate, and then that's one way to fund it, you know? So, and those are things to think about.
I certainly agree that you know, looking at the cost of implementation is always a worthwhile thing to do, for sure. I guess I disagree with Pete on maybe the magnitude of those, but I think there are other reasons to be on the fence about this, at least for myself. I looked at the comprehensive plan, and that's where this comes from. It's not part. Isn't in DEP's guidelines that we do this. That's and the recommendation that comes from the natural resources section. I think I marked it. And you know, let me just read it, and then I'll tell you what. You know, I tried to go back and see, okay, what's the basis for that recommendation? What were they trying to accomplish by recommending it? And the recommendation itself says reads as follows: revise the shoreline zoning ordinance or adopt other land use provisions as needed to include areas within 75 feet of all perennial streams and to ensure adequate protection for kettle hole bogs. We need to not lose sight of that, but let's deal with streams first. It doesn't say necessarily, it doesn't go so far as to say protect as resource protection, or anything specific in those lines. And frankly, I couldn't find anything in that chapter that provided a base. You know, what was the rationale for that recommendation? I couldn't find anything. You know, when you look at these perennials, not just perennial streams, but streams in general, but let's just focus on what's in front of us on the table. You know, there's a number of reasons to be maybe concerned about them. One would be phosphorus and stormwater runoff into being carried by that from the upper reaches in the watershed to the lakes. So there's number one, there's water quality reasons. Number two, is those corridors tend to be important from travel corridors for wildlife, not only just mammals, but also particularly the more many of the shorebirds, not shorebirds, but songbirds, and of course you have a lot of amphibians as well that migrate along those. But you know, having said all that, it makes me wonder how much additional value we get by regulating it at the town level in addition and above what DEP does. I mean, when I've talked to inland fish and wildlife in the past, not in this context, but in the context of, like, for example, the subdivision next door to me and how much of a buffer needs to be along a stream so that it will act as a viable travel corridor. You're talking about 100 yards on either side. 75 feet, 25 feet, it doesn't matter. It's not going to be adequate. So, you know, in that case, it's sort of a wash, you know. In terms of water quality, 25 feet versus 75 feet, it really depends on slope. 25 feet is more than adequate for flat slope. 75 feet isn't adequate enough if you have 15% slope.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I guess my point is I don't know if we're going to be accomplishing that much.
Right.
I don't know how others feel, but let's put it this way: you got to balance, right? Political costs versus what are you going to accomplish benefiting Belgrade at large and its environment.
That's a good point where you're talking about the slope. And I hadn't thought about that. Maybe we can this needs to be researched further and come up with, if they got a particular slope, let's say it's low at 5 degrees, the setback wouldn't have to be, as great. The steeper the slope, the greater the setback, and that would kind of start making.
But it's not going to be adequate anyways. So
no.
It would,
a lot of these are way up in the woods.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me, is we're starting to regulate way away from the lakes, and the effect they have on the lakes will be very minimal, very little. And I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of it.
What are your thoughts, Rich?
I'm somewhere in the middle. It's like part of me says, well, every little bit helps, but then again, you're right, a lot of these things are areas one that's here in the swamp, nobody's gonna build there and everything. You got this stuff up here that's half of it's fish and wildlife land.
Well, and like Hoyt Brook, that's associated with a wetland. Nobody's going to be able to build, maybe back here at some point, but
That is there, I'd hate to think that our amendments got killed because we added something that
right.
almost like if we were ever going to do that, we ought to do it as a separate kind of thing.
Well, or at some point in the future when Belgrade's more built out and there's more of a threat.
None of these are really in any place where it's steep, is it?
Well,
This is
Some of
very
them are.
flat.
here's one here that's
Here's
not
one.
going to be probably, you may be more familiar with this. We've got a bog over here. Nobody's going to build over there. That looks like it's wicked steep.
When you go down.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
Well, you're over here, aren't you, or something?
no.
Yeah, North Bay.
So I'm right off this stream, right up in here.
Yeah. So if you go back, well, yeah, this is.
So
I know
that-
that's steep.
See that brook? It is steep down through there. That runs all the way from behind Liz Lux, all the way down that shoreline and comes out. We used to play on that as kids, and it's all grown over. But there's a definite, that's the very edge, and then you have your upland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but like you say, it's all slope district there. And if we cover that with a 250-foot buffer anyways,
Right.
then that's non-existent. That's not an issue anyways.
That one's right in the middle of the bog, I
Bog.
think, or whatever.
What is that? That's some kind of a.
So by the boat ramp, it's that little one that comes over by
Oh, yeah, right alongside the
by
boat ramp.
Carrie,
Yeah, Carrie and Melissa, and all,
Carrie and Diana.
Diana and Oliver, right?
Hmm.
That whole area is it's pretty soggy.
Yeah, so there are a lot of places on this map that I would see very little chance of people building. There are a couple of places where people either have currently built or might find a spot that would otherwise be impacted if we enacted this 75-foot thing.
I thought I would find in the comprehensive plan sort of a beefier basis for, some basis provided for why that recommendation. I mean, I can come up, I've already stated what would have been my reasons had I been, working on that part. But I was surprised that there wasn't nothing there.
Yeah,
And it's interesting too, this is sort of a aside, but if you talk to the people or you listen to the presentations that have been done on water quality testing for the Belgrade Lakes in general by, the various lakes associations, the BRCA and the Belgrade Lakes Resource Center, they're not doing any water testing of the streams. They're not testing anything coming in from anywhere other than, they're not getting anything from the vast majority of the watershed in terms of impact on phosphorus and stormwater. And it's a curious thing because not be doing that would seem to me, particularly if they're already talking about remediation of Great Pond.
Right. Because each of the streams are sources.
Or potential anyway, until proven otherwise.
Right.
So I don't know if that indicates a lack of concern about those streams on their part, or just a lack of funding, or a number of things. But
So if number one, the recommendation that came from that subcommittee from the comprehensive plan, it sounds as though, even though they wished for 75 feet setback, that seems to be a number that was selected, and we don't know why or how, but lacking something substantive to tell us why. It seems like it's maybe it was thought of as at least in spirit, to have something in place, to protect. Now, when that was made, I don't know if, because you said the Natural Resource Protection Act that Maine DEP has currently covers something. I'm not sure the timing of things, like if the subcommittee said that one thing, but yet this other regulation or NERPA piece wasn't in place. I don't know.
I think it probably was in place because at the time, when was our comprehensive plan updated?
2012, 2013, it was definitely in place.
Okay, it was in place when I was there, which was 8 years ago.
Yeah. So this,
yeah, it makes good sense then.
The town started working on the comprehensive plan in 2012.
But the DEP only added that point system thing adjacent to those smaller streams. That includes, I believe it also includes the, now I'll take that back. I was going to say, I thought it included intermittent streams too, but maybe it doesn't. But that was only added to the law a couple years before I got done. So that's relatively new, 10 years.
Maybe there was an awareness, maybe, I don't know.
One thing I was going to add is if we ultimately decide not to expand the stream district to include areas beyond where the fork is, it would seem to me there are other things the town could do, and that is to educate landowners, or at least have information available to landowners on the Natural Resource Protection Act, because I'm guessing a lot of these landowners don't even know about that.
Right.
And I can tell you that I'm not sure half of the NERPA people and the field people, at least for the first few years when that law was in effect, half of them didn't have a clue what the point system was, even though it was in the law.
It's funny, way back in the 70s, up until, this law was enacted, Inland Fish and Wildlife administered the Stream Protection Act.
So if we decided to not take the recommendation that came from the Natural Resource Committee and the comprehensive plan to add that protection where the perennial streams come together, and include that buffer of 75 feet on either side of those things up that fork, up of that juncture. My personal take is that's okay, but looking forward, finding ways to, where appropriate, come up with some, like where it's steeper as opposed to flatter, either whether it's through education or something, allow the town people to understand, where there are impacts, and that decisions made to do something is going to have impact on the water.
I mean, I guess I should clarify for the record as well as just for everybody's information that I was hoping that in the comprehensive plan, I would have found why it was important to expand shoreland zoning to cover these stretches of streams above and beyond what is the protections already offered under state law.
Right.
And there's nothing there. There's no even mention of state law. And the protection, admittedly, somewhat less protection, but that state law provides under the Natural Resources Protection Act.
What do you need, a motion?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, I'll make a motion that we not make this perennial stream part of the shoreline zoning ordinance going forward. New shoreline zoning ordinance.
Do you mean expanding it? Because we already cover some perennial streams.
Well, with the new one,
Expanded.
expanded, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Right. I just want to make sure we're all
Yeah, right,
hearing what
yeah.
you're thinking.
Yeah.
Which is
Where's our note taker?
right here.
Okay. Right.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a motion and seconded, and the motion is to not include expanded perennial stream coverage in the shoreline zoning ordinance. Hope I said that in the correct order. Any more discussion on this? I mean, part of me is a little hesitant, only in that personally I want to be able to address a concern that was listed and presented to us by the comprehensive plan folks. But it seems as though in this particular case we don't have a lot of substance behind it other than a desire. In my opinion, what I'm hearing. So that's my personal opinion. Any other discussion items? Rich, I heard you say too before that you felt a little bit in the middle on this. That sometimes any protection you can do is better than zero, and I feel you on that. I do. It's an important aspect.
And I know it's not zero because DEP does regulate those
Correct.
areas now too, so I'm not upset by the motion anyway.
So I think I'm a little consoled thinking about the fact that there's state level protection, 25 feet in these cases. NERPA is the thing, that's the vehicle that we would use. Any more discussion? All those in favor? So Nikki, I just recommend that you get a chance to listen to the minutes. But the motion was made by Pete to not include and seconded by Craig to not include expanded perennial stream protection. That's the one we showed it. And we just agreed to not do that in the shoreline zone ordinance. George, thanks for researching too.
Oh, it's just a matter of reading it.
So thank you for looking through that. I think next on our list is to discuss the non-conforming structures issue.
What's that?
Somebody will have to explain that one to me.
Yeah, I can't remember where we were.
That has to, well, put it this way. You probably remember after I discuss it, bring it up, but we are current, and we may want to keep it the way we do, but we address non-conforming structures in two ways. One is if it were damaged by an act of God versus damaged or destroyed by, if we go to the ordinance.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
Done intentionally, and if it's done willfully, you're supposed to get a permit from you before they do it. Personally, I see that as nothing but fighting with the people when they do it, and then, but it really came down to the guy that we dealt with, the guy that got all upset with me.
The deck?
Yeah.
The deck.
Oh.
Deck.
The code enforcement officer's deck?
Yeah. I was looking through that, and I talked to this with George, where I said, this thing said if you tear it down willfully and you don't get a permit from DEP, we could have argued that he had no right to rebuild it because he never got a permit from Gary.
Mm-hmm.
But then George picked out another section. I didn't read that before I came in. I'm kind of just bringing it up from remembering that. George said something about, well, there's a conflict there because, and this was after we had already fought with him.
Yeah.
But George was saying, well, I read it over here, but it says he can do it. And I think this overrides that. And I decided I won't even bring it up at that point. But I think we could have argued that he couldn't even rebuild it at all because he didn't get a permit from Gary first. But I think we need to read that non-conforming structure sentence section, and maybe we do that before we meet again or whatever. And I know we don't want to drag this on forever, but I'm not sure we want to keep that provision in there because I think it's troublesome.
So it's on pages 16 and 17 of our current ordinance. I mean, this is, we go through this, but, and I think what I mentioned to Rich was that you have damage or by willful act, then you have a section on by accidental or natural means, and then in paragraph 4 you have, well, whatever means, it doesn't much matter.
Any non-conforming structure.
And it all falls back to the greatest, moving it back to the greatest practical extent. And that's still the same in the guidelines. I don't know how the guidelines deal with this, if anything's changed there, but
the guidelines don't address willful versus an act of God or whatever.
It doesn't matter how it happened.
Damaged or destroyed by any cause by more than 50%, you have to move it back to the greatest practical extent.
Right. Well, this says structure damaged or destroyed by willful act or by intent.
Right. And then if you proceed, though, to paragraph 2 on the next page, it's non-conforming structure damaged or destroyed by accidental or natural means. Mm-hmm. And then you go to 4.
And that's where it talks about willful?
No, it doesn't, regardless of cause.
Oh, I see.
It's sort of like, what? What?
Right. So
what?
Why should cause have a different outcome?
Right.
When it's destroyed, that's what we care about, right? When you non-conformance, when you build it.
And as it is now, 1 says unless you get a permit before you damage or destroy it, you can't rebuild it. 2 says if it's an act of God, you can rebuild it, move it back to the greatest practical extent. And then 4 says it doesn't matter how. There's a conflict there. One says it doesn't matter how, the other one says, well, if you do it yourself, you can't. we got to fix that.
Yeah.
And the question is, do we want to? In my mind, do we want to distinguish between a willful act and an act of God as to whether or not you can rebuild it and what you do ahead of time? Mm-hmm. Or do we just simply incorporate, for the most part, paragraph 4? It says no matter how it is damaged or destroyed,
That's what I would do.
That was the DEP guidelines saying that the separation of the two was done here at the local level.
Right.
And I think that was fine, except there's still got 4 there that says,
Right.
doesn't matter what the cause is, you can do it. And so when I talked to George about that with that guy's application, and he was already screaming at us, and we went out to the site visit and never mentioned it. And George pointed this out. I thought, I'm going to shut up. I'm not even going to bring up the issue about willful destruction.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I would be of the same mindset that you are. That just keep it simple and go with, regardless of
What's
how
in the
it's-
guidelines?
Yeah, go with the guidelines. Doesn't matter how it was destroyed.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to think, okay, just because I'm thinking that, how does that play out with the taxpayer here? Because this was set up for some reason. You know, somebody had an idea to include these different reasons about how a non-conforming structure was destroyed. Someone had some idea.
I'm kind of thinking that the idea that somebody had was, if it was an act of God, we're not going to punish the guy. Or, we're going to let him rebuild it, because who can predict what's going to happen?
Right.
If I decide to do it myself, and I don't get a permit to do it, then it's your tough luck.
Right.
I'm just thinking, we're going to be fighting if we really follow that the letter. You're going to end up with somebody having a nice building that they decided or whatever that they wanted to tear down, and all of a sudden we say, well, I'm sorry, we can't give you a permit to rebuild that.
Gary, can you see a reason why it would be important for you to know when, even if it's due to a hurricane versus somebody, tearing down their camp because they just want to, for you to know about that and require them to get a permit from you in advance, as it does in paragraph 1?
Which doesn't make a lot of sense, because I can't issue a permit until they get your board approval anyway. See what I mean?
So it becomes sort of a catch-22. I mean, the case that we're
The
kind of forming, that's a bad example in the sense that was done in violation. And we didn't get the application until after the fact.
Right.
Presumably, if somebody was going to do this right, they'd come to us first, and they wouldn't destroy what they had first.
Correct.
Yeah, that's the case. I'm still thinking.
Yeah.
How do the other board members feel about this? I mean, does it need more time or thinking?
I think simple's. It doesn't matter whether willfully or.
I'm with you.
Whether it was a flood or a fire or it just rotted,
Yeah.
it should go to that paragraph 4.
Yeah. I can
And if
see.
he does it ahead of time, I think the key here is that we make sure that we have proof that the thing was there to begin with.
Yeah.
And that's why the guy brought all the photographs and all that, and he showed back in 1964.
Mhm.
Right. Right. Now I'm trying to think about this. This would not be often, but say I'm a long-time owner of a property in the shoreline zone, but maybe have fallen on hard times lately, and something happens. Not because I wanted to, but say act of God, tree falls on it, destroys my place. I want to build right back where I was. I come to the board and say, well, can't do it if this is enacted, right? If what we're thinking is we follow the guidelines and go by basically from before. So it doesn't matter how my property was destroyed or the structure was destroyed. I'm gonna have to rebuild back to the greatest practice. So if I'm that guy with that property or with that structure on that property, tree falls on my house, destroys it, flattens it. And if I want to rebuild right there, I wouldn't be able to. I'd have to move it back to the greatest practical extent. Because that's what we're talking about, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's the way it is now, right?
Yeah.
Well, based on this, sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Well, where's the section that talks about
We were
within 1 year?
Yeah, exactly, and that was back, I think.
The two,
Hmm?
paragraph 2.
Paragraph.
Yeah, at the second to last line.
I'm sorry, Jerry, I had so many different papers.
You do.
I keep them around for no good reason, really. Okay.
What page is that, George?
16.
17.
16, 17.
Okay, right here.
So here's 16, here's 17. Paragraph 2.
Yep.
Sure, sir.
Last 3 lines.
So shall have been issued by the planning board within 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in my example, if this all changes and we go to the way we're talking, right, I'd have to move it back to the greatest practical extent. That'd be one of those things would be just a hard news to be heard by me in this case.
Well, let me say that the state guidelines have, I think, are you reading this paragraph 2 here to, that as if it were an act of God and 3 fell on it, that you could get a permit and rebuild it in place under our current ordinance without having to move it back?
Mm-hmm.
That would be my
That's
question.
certainly not what the state guidelines say.
Okay.
Okay.
State guidelines basically is number 4.
You say the state.
And I could see George, not George, but even under this paragraph B or whatever it is here, the one, number 2, that 4 would supersede that, because said by any cause.
It would if you changed it, yeah.
Right.
Well, my thinking, what I'm saying is, if our town is, put it this way, this would have gotten by us at DEP, if that's what paragraph 2 is supposed to do, because the state guidelines essentially is paragraph 4, which says doesn't matter by any cause, whether it's intentional or by an act of God, if it's damaged or destroyed by more than 50%, move it back. So I guess I understand where you're coming from, but I can tell you the state guidelines since 1980 has said move it back no matter how it is.
So this is different than the state guidelines?
That is less restrictive, that paragraph there.
Really?
The state guidelines is
Okay. What
regardless
does the
of
Model
cause.
Act say about this?
So
Well,
it's as Rich said, the wording it has is what's on in paragraph 4. Yeah, I just found it. It reads any non-conforming structure which is located less than the required setback from a water body, tributary stream, wetland, which is removed or damaged or destroyed, regardless of cause, by more than 50% of the market value of the structure before such damage, may be reconstructed or replaced, provided that a permit is obtained within 18 months. And provided provided that such reconstruction or replacement is in compliance with the water body setback requirement to the greatest practical extent as determined by the planning board.
That's chapter 4.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's in the Model Act.
Yeah, in the guidelines, model guidelines.
The model guidelines we're talking about.
Yeah.
You're referring to the older guidelines, right?
well, the guidelines since 1990
Yeah.
essentially said the same thing. I know
Yeah, this isn't new
18
language
months-
that I just read. This is existing language. It was never it wasn't changed in the most recent
We
changes.
used to say 12 months. I think
Right.
you read 18 months. So it must have
Yeah,
changed.
but that's not underlined here, but
I know it said 12 months. I don't remember anywhere saying 18 months, but.
Does that answer your question, Pete?
Yeah, I just want to make sure what the Model Act say. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My recommendation would be to incorporate B as these pretty much standalone provision for dealing with non-conforming structures that are damaged or destroyed by more than 50%.
I think that's reasonable.
I'm with you on that. I just want to kind of also think about it from another perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean that'd be hard.
Yeah.
That'd be very hard. I
Now-
mean, the closest we got to that, or at least on my time on the board, was the gentleman that came in down in Johnson's old camps there, where during a storm a big pine tree came across. As it turned out, he was able to show that it wasn't more than 50% of the value.
Right.
We did some other things wrong, but
Well, he also,
but in terms of the basic decision of allowing,
he also owned, what, a 10-foot plat around his
yeah,
home? It was a condo, right?
right.
So, I honestly don't think there would be many instances of the example I gave that would come forward, but there'll probably be one or two.
Well,
And
there could have been in that October storm.
Well, that and a campfire, if you have a fire,
Right.
that's.
Yeah, I'm just thinking the greatest practical extent. So that particular clause in there, the greatest practical extent, it gives some leeway, really, for the applicant, for the homeowner, because if they got some big trees in back there, you can't go beyond that, telephone poles, et cetera, you can't go back, to more than 100 feet or 250 feet.
Right. It's just like
Right,
if you want to put a
right.
foundation on your cottage now.
Right, yeah, back, yeah.
Well, and that's what saved the gentleman down. And I mean, he had just shortly prior to that had put in a poured concrete foundation.
Right.
So that made the value numbers work.
Right.
And if you have a foundation, you can rebuild on it anyways,
Right.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to move it.
No.
So, Rich, you had a recommendation. I guess I would, unless there's more discussion, I would entertain a motion on this aspect. I think I really like the idea of where we're going. I just want to make sure we.
If I had to
Heard it.
summarize it, my recommendation would be to stick with the current state guidelines and not distinguish between the different types of destruction.
Do you want a motion to that effect?
Yes, please.
So I would make a motion that we adopt in lieu of our existing language for non-conforming structures damaged or destroyed, we replace it with the language in the DEP Chapter 1000 for reconstruction or replacement of a non-conforming structure.
You say the DEP 1000 dated, just give a date.
I have no clue.
It's a date.
Yeah.
No,
There's no date on it.
the new one, the proposed one I'm talking about. It's dated.
No date.
I mean, there's a it has to be. It's 2016, something like that.
It's probably on the back, the very back of the page or something.
January, no, that ain't it. May 5th, no, that ain't it either.
2012, isn't that? May 5th, 2012.
Yes, May 5th, 2012.
No, it isn't. Because we're 2018, it was enacted around 2016. Officially.
Well, that's the most current date it was amended according to
The
this.
model act, that was put through. That's why we're doing all this.
I think they amended it way back when, but never did anything with it for a long time.
That's because the LePage administration wouldn't allow them to.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Is, the model act, my whole thing is, what's it say in the model act?
That's what he just said.
But it wasn't 2012, it was 2016.
That's the most current date that it was amended.
They put it on a shelf for 3 years.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. They had that committee working on it, they adopted it way
Right.
back when. It
Right.
was a couple of years after I quit.
2012. Yeah.
So right after LePage got in, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, you're right now, and it took that long for it to go through DEP.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Chapter
That's
one.
right.
Pete, time flies when you're having fun.
Guess so. Wow.
The beauty of politics.
That is the thing.
Yeah, okay.
So we have a motion on the floor, and thank you for helping point out the guidelines and date of that, so we're all clear about it. And that we haven't had a second on that yet.
So basically, what we're doing is getting rid of 1 and 2.
And 3, basically, is gonna be 4,
Okay.
but,
Replaced by the language in the guidelines.
I'll second that motion.
okay, so we've got a motion and seconded. Any other discussion on this? If not, all those in favor? Thank you.
Let's get rid of a lot of language.
Yes, and I like that we're keeping it simple, and keeping in line with the state guidelines too. We want to talk about the,
But that, I'm sorry, to keep it simple, the KISS
Yeah,
acronym, without
Keep it
the
simple,
second
stupid.
S.
right, so just KISS.
Alright.
Yeah, keep it simple, that's it. So does the board wish to continue? This is a time check, it is, okay, yeah.
9
almost
o'clock.
Yeah.
What time is it?
9,
That's gonna be a long discussion.
yeah, I do.
What's that?
What I have on my notes are the
Minimum
min
lot
lot
size.
size, and then I have in quotes the waiver thing that we brought up.
Yeah, now we also have to look at the map. Can we just take 5 minutes, if we don't do any, if you
Yeah.
want, if you're gonna cut off, could I just have 5 minutes to talk about some things on the map?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Peter,
This-
add to your list the kettle hole bogs. Keep on dropping that.
Thank you, George.
Now, that's something of a different, the kettle hole bogs, from shoreline zoning perspective, we're talking about ponds, wetlands, rivers, streams, that are, and wetlands and ponds, 10 acres or more in size. A lot of these kettle hole ponds are not.
Smaller than 10
don't
acres.
fit aren't even shoreline zone, so if we get into that, we'll have to
Yeah.
somehow come up with a regulation that's regulating more than the standard shoreline zone.
Right, yeah. No. There may be a lot of reasons why we don't do it. It's just comp plan says we should at least consider it.
Since it's late, I won't go grab I looked at, this is the map that Sewell Company
You want
did.
the other one, Rich?
Actually, yeah, if you can bring it in, I don't want to take up too much time, but I compared the two, and one of the things I noticed with this one here, and it's good to have that information, but I'm not sure we want it on our shoreline zoning map, but they show, which our regular ordinance, our current zoning map doesn't show. See these green areas? It's forested wetland. It's not part of the shoreline zone. And it's concerning to me that people looking at this map, I think for shoreline zoning purposes, we're regulating a 250-foot buffer or a 75-foot strip on a stream. So you look at that, and the bogs are fine. We got a lot of wetland areas shown in this blue here, but you'll notice that for the most part, we have a border, if you will, a 250-foot border around the different ponds and wetlands and stuff. When they did this draft map here, they showed the forested wetlands. Now, it's good to know where the forested wetlands are, but I think it makes it confusing for the individual. And he looks at this and he says, what the heck does this mean? Or here. I would recommend that we ask them to take the forested wetlands off of this map. Now, That's one thing. It'll make it a heck of a lot easier to review than it is now. The other thing is I finally figured something out. In our current zoning map, we have these districts that are called critical area boundary, or known as a environmental advisory area, high sensitivity advisory area, and I think I figured out what they are. They are limited residential surrounding a wetland that's less than 10 acres, resource protection surrounding a wetland that's less than 10 acres, and a resource protection slope surrounding a wetland less than 10 acres. Well, if they're less than 10 acres, they're not covered by our ordinance. And
That's not what it's
that's what these are.
even on our current map.
Our current map has those. There's one, like this one right here.
Are they yellow areas?
Yeah, they got this puke green
Okay.
around them.
Okay.
They're all less than 10 acres,
Right.
and they're called environmental advisory areas.
In the body of the ordinance, there's no such thing.
No. I'm thinking that it wouldn't, my thoughts are we ought to, the actual official map, we ought to make as less confusing as possible. Now, it doesn't mean that we might not want to have for our use another map that shows these areas, shows the forested wetlands, so that if we're looking at a project and we're not in the field, we might be able to know what the surrounding area is. But my thinking is I'd like to see those areas taken off of, if it's not covered by the ordinance, and this is the shoreline zoning map, don't put it there.
Yeah.
Because it makes it confusing and it makes it hard for the individual to be able to read it.
No, I agree, and you know, I don't know about the forested wetlands per se, but with respect to a lot of those bogs have pretty unique plant. You know, they're main natural critical natural areas designated, and those show up on the beginning with wildlife habitat with maps. I wouldn't be surprised if a wooded wetland had some kind of particular value that it did too, would too.
Right.
So we have, that resource. It's available online, of course, as well.
What is shown what are the kettle holes that you talk about look like on our existing map?
They're those advisory districts, right?
Yeah, there's one
Or
here.
not districts, they're,
No, it's just an advisory.
yeah.
It's not a district.
So, I mean, that predates beginning with habitat.
Right.
And it was probably intended just so that the planning board would know that there's these sort of unique critical, important areas, but even if you don't regulate them.
I think that's Kettle Hole Pond, just past the Pinkham Cove Road. You look down over and
Yeah, that's the one that Colby
right there.
studied the
It's
heck
on
out
our
of.
shoreline zoning map, but it's not regulated.
Where's the ones across the street behind Ralph's?
Let's see.
And then there's the ones behind the kayak, Belgrade Canoe and
That's what I
Kayak.
said, yeah. Behind Ralph's. Yeah.
It's hard to figure out. Was it dark gray? The other thing that I would want to do when we get done is we got too many different colors that are the same, similar colors.
Right.
It's hard to sometimes. Is this shade of green?
Right.
Does it-
To really distinguish, right?
Especially once it fades after 20 years.
I know.
So you take off all the forested wetlands, even if it's within the 250 foot, or would you keep those and take the other off? Or?
We just take the part outside the 250 foot. This is resource protection, partly because it's Austin Bog, but this would be resource protection even if it maybe not here. But if this were not a higher or moderate value wetland, what we'd have is resource protection right here in the forested wetland, and you get up the upland, this would be limited residential, and then you go back into forest resource protection there.
I think we need to be transparent to the public, and I hear you, we kind of keep two sets of books, one for them and one for us. You know, I got a problem with that. And forested wetlands, it is part of the shoreline zoning, and so this map is showing beyond the 250 feet. I don't really see the problem with letting the public know, you know, that you got forested wetlands, and as part of shoreline zoning, it's defined in the definitions part. So I don't see the harm in putting it in there. To me, it's transparent, being transparent to the public. So that's my feeling on it.
I got an idea based on the word transparent that you just mentioned, Pete. Could it be that for the published map, we take away forested wetlands, but in the interest of being transparent, have an overlay that would then allow us to have the published map, but then whoever wants to see where forested wetlands be, we overlay that and can just demonstrate at any time.
Okay, so you do that, so the applicant would have to know there's something, the forested wetland does make a difference, you know, where they build something, where they add on, etc.
Let me.
Well,
I'm getting confused now.
I'm thinking to answer your question that the answer is no, because as far as the shoreline zone is concerned, it doesn't take into account. We don't regulate forested wetlands.
I would go back to the principle that Rich had mentioned earlier, that if it's governed by shoreline zoning, it's on the map. If it's not, it's not.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so
It's not hiding anything from the public. Plus,
No,
this
agree
other
with that.
map, if we did have one that showed the forested wetlands and these small bogs areas, it'd still be, it's not something we'd hide from the public. But we're just making the map simple so the public
For
can
the
read it.
shoreline zone and the 250 feet.
And in terms of, if for some reason, to be honest with you, at this point, you know, I can't think of a case where we felt it was important to know what was outside the shoreline zone but nearby. But we do have the other mapping, beginning with habitat, which, you know, we use obviously when we're doing commercial developments and stuff of that nature. I could see us getting pretty confused,
Right, so
and confusing the public.
you'd show the shoreline on this map here. We'd show the forested wetland, and then anything outside 250 feet we wouldn't show it. So that means
This would fall up here. This wouldn't be here because
right.
it's not
So
part of the
there'd be no
shoreline.
problem for the map company to redo this.
I don't think so. They just tell them to take out the forested wetland. And like these here, these are forested wetlands.
Yeah.
They're not regulated at all under this ordinance, but they're stuck in the middle. And, you know, a person that knows what they're looking at and everything is fine. But the average individual, they're going to come into town and see this thing here and think that they're in the middle of the shoreline zone.
Yeah, I need to get a permit when I don't.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not hiding anything. It's just making it more simpler for the public.
Making it match what we regulate.
All right, as long as it's shown, you know, within 250 feet, yes, that makes sense. Yeah, I can go along with that.
Especially one that's less than 10 acres and it's zone resource protection. The person comes in here and says, oh, geez, I'm in a resource protection district.
Yeah.
And they're not even in any zone.
Yeah.
So anyway, I would suggest, and I don't know, maybe we can work through Jenny or yourself or whatever, or I could go up to Sewell sometime if we need to and say, plus there's other issues here too, other than having, you know, wetlands that aren't even 10 acres or ponds 10 acres. I did notice a significant issue is, you know, here we got Messalonsky Lake, and this I think is the symbol for resource protection, and I know half the shoreline of Messalonsky Lake.
I think it's high sensitivity slope area. It's a different shade of red. It is, I swear.
Yeah.
Because I think
One
this.
here.
Well, high sensitivity advisory area, sensitivity slope area, isn't a district. You know, there's the resource protection slope district. This is not a district.
Mhm.
I wonder where they got those from.
You know, and here's a
Probably just
purple up here,
probably just
which-
GIS layers that.
Limited
That's
residential.
like down here, get rid of purple.
Yeah. But So, yeah, resource protection slope, but is that, I can't imagine that we got resource protection slope district, all the way up along, there's just nothing but camps along there.
It's not RP.
No, but that's what it says.
I think that
I think it's
this-
a mistake in the coloring.
yeah.
Which, well, we just look at this.
Follows the railroad tracks, right?
That's actually the same thing all the way along, the same distance.
Yeah, I think
So
you're
we'll have to
right.
Deal with the
Yeah, I think
district
that,
change somewhat. I didn't go into spend 3 hours here picking out every little thing, because I want to talk about the overriding issues first, and then work with them to make sure we got it right.
Right. But I think, well, personally, I think we're heading in the right direction. Make this simple. You know, make it match
Sure,
what we regulate, so that it's clear to an applicant, a taxpayer, and it looks like some editing or corrections are probably in order. So could you, Nick, please alert Denny that we're going to have a request to Sewell to do some.
Modifications.
That's a good way to put it.
Or corrections.
Or corrections. And I'm pretty certain it will not take a whole lot of time.
Probably not a whole lot of money.
Well,
And
and I don't know with regard to cost, whether you want to go back to them twice, once depending on what we find out from Inland Fish and Wildlife, and then what corrections Rich has come up with, or combine it into one change.
As of right now, Nick, we've paid for all our bills up till now, right?
I believe I'll ask Dennis because I think I asked Dennis, but I'll ask him again. I think everything's paid for. That's just a draft. Now you guys make corrections. You send it back, and then they'll fix them. I don't know if you can do once or twice. I'll ask him. But right now,
Thank
if
you.
you
Would that
send
be
it
a-
back once, I think you
Yeah,
there's
so
no charge.
so the question becomes, do they bill us for those change orders or changes?
Right.
And if they do, that may come out of our 2018, 2018.
Then you're gonna do it once versus twice.
Yeah,
Right,
because
right.
But if they allow you to make a change without being charged, then we still want to do it once, actually.
right, yeah.
Right, we want to be efficient, you know, with both our time and theirs. So.
Right.
So yeah, let's do that. But that's the direction to go anyway. And I think basically turning off, you know, like the number of things that we've talked about so far would be basically deselecting them from
Right.
the maplers, which is not. I mean, it takes 2 minutes to really do that. That part's not bad. But corrections, on the other hand, like Rich pointed out, there might have to be some tweaking.
And then same if we start deleting some wetlands because they went from moderate to zip.
Zip, right. So just please alert.
Yeah. I'll
Denny.
Yeah, it might be good to find out though if those are going to be,
Right.
you know, new bills that we have to cover somehow.
I got a feeling when time we delete the wetlands are less than 10 acres, we won't have all that many moderates for him to look at. Because I already discovered that these two here, 64 and 65, is this and this, which both say resource protection surrounding less than 10 acres and limited residential. So these two are already off the map.
But those, you know, it isn't like it's a, you know, fill them in if you want them kind of thing. It's still
Right.
protected by the Natural Resources Protection Act.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. So, having said all that, Gary, do you have any updates for us?
We have quite a few things coming for approval.
Next week.
We have that Wilson's Auto repair.
Yeah.
Ron Belvance, is he coming?
Frank Wall, something like that. Frank Wall, you know, that's the last name. That's not a commercial.
It's something anytime I was working on. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, actually, it is Frank Wall.
Belvance, I haven't got their application back yet.
Bright Side's coming back.
Bright Side was tabled last time, right?
They're tabled. Yeah, the last time they were tabled yet. Another
Oh, and what about the other, the Kennebec?
boats. They're coming back. Everything was tabled at the last meeting. So that's
Kids,
all
should we
coming
be
back.
bringing our sleeping bags or what?
I know.
I'm not gonna add anything else to the agenda.
Thank you.
And the other thing, I think I have an April 3rd court date with Ben's Auto Sales.
Ooh,
Okay.
you certainly know how to have a good time.
Yeah, really.
Bring a book, a good book.
I think it's April 3rd, don't quote me, it could be
Yeah.
a different date, but it's in.
Assuming there aren't a gazillion continuations, right?
Did you get a chance to talk to Dennis about the upcoming meeting and the money they wanna take away from us?
I
As
haven't
to what that
spoken.
is.
I haven't spoken to him about it.
What's that, Linda? What is it?
We talked about it last time.
In the general fund.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
basically
wanna
the shape of.
take it from us, put it in general
Oh,
fund.
Nick sent us an email.
Right.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't. Let me see.
Well, it had,
Basically, it was all okay.
That wasn't the case?
I can't really.
it was related to, well, you answered the question of, do we have enough money in our budget for mapping? Your response after you talked to Dennis was
Yeah.
it's already been paid for
Right.
up to now for what we've
Right.
done.
Right.
Maybe more, but we don't know that until you ask Dennis the follow-up
Yeah, 'cause if
question.
we get into the slope district, that could change. So that's more map changes.
I don't remember.
I don't remember that either.
I don't remember the part though about.
I could have sworn I asked him, and he did give me an answer.
Could you ask again?
I will ask again, yeah. But I don't think it's inconsiderate what they did.
'Cause when I brought my ballots back,
What
Dennis
did we
asked me about that,
decide
if
on-
something about parish and changing the slope district.
Until we
I says, is that what we incurred down
we're gonna do
off
it.
Castle Island Road? He says, it's either that or it's changing that map for them or it's something else.
So, Peter, am I correct that what is outstanding for us to evaluate further and decide upon is and discuss is Kettle Hole bogs, addressing the minimum lot size issue in the Belgrade Lakes Village and or limited commercial,
Yeah.
the waiver of setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
In that same district?
Yes. Is there something else?
Those are three I have. Yep, I think so. So just so everybody knows, so Andy Dunbar called me about the Bright Side one, because we had talked.
Oh, yeah, he called me as well.
Yeah, because we had talked when he was here
Yeah.
last about, gosh, you know, as we go forward, we weren't predicting, but said it was going to be very hard to get to a spot where we could approve it, right? So then, if we act on it and deny, he would then try to go to the Board of Appeals. So I just want everybody to know that he called me about that, and I told him just to recap that and said, that's what I'm seeing.
That's why.
Can we deny an application that's not complete? Because they have an incomplete application at this point.
Andy did, Bright Side did, what was he missing?
I'd have to look at it.
I didn't think his was.
Okay. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I thought it was, but
Because
I'm just.
usually Andy's pretty.
He's pretty thorough.
He's pretty. on top of it.
Yeah, no,
I don't think it was that.
I don't know why I had that in the back of my
Yeah,
head,
I
but
don't think it was that.
okay.
He was in
Good.
twice, right? The first time he was missing stuff and then he came back and I thought he,
Yep.
Sean, with Sean?
No, Sean, he only came in once. You're thinking of the goods.
The antiques.
Janet
Oh,
Epstein.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, she's all set now.
Right. Gary, I sent you an email. I know everybody got an email from Denny Ketchel about this Camp Moden getting
Oh, yeah.
kind of whacked by DEP and having to do an after fact stormwater permit.
Right, that was another thing I was gonna bring up tonight.
We got an email on that when?
I don't know if
This
it's today.
today sometime.
Oh,
yeah.
I talked to
I
Warren
went home.
from Camp Moden this evening. Cause I've had 3 people call me about a new ball field they're planning to construct, and I'm like, I don't know anything about it. I haven't heard a word, so,
What do you wanna know about it?
huh?
What do you want to know about it? I can give you a little.
Well, Warren called me tonight.
Okay.
Warren said, yes, we get all our DEP approvals this week. We are constructing a new ball field, and I said, well, and Al Hodgson is doing the plan. I said, we do need to go to the planning board, which he didn't know, but he said, I assume Al Hodgson knows that. And I'll call Al and make sure that he gets an application to the planning board.
Yeah, that was my question, because
Yeah.
apparently they've already built an access road, a dining hall, or expanded a dining hall. I'm just reading from the findings of fact here on this.
We gave him a permit, didn't we, for the dining hall?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Was that the dining hall, or was that housing for their camp?
Both. We've done
Oh, it's
done a
okay.
couple applications.
So that was that shoreline zoning or commercial development?
Commercial.
I don't think it was in the shoreline.
The dining
That's
hall
right, it wasn't.
was outside.
It was
of-
outside.
That's
The
right.
dining hall was outside of shoreline zoning.
Yeah.
And then an
You can't
outdoor
for a park.
hockey court and a trapeze. Anyway, it says here that they increased the acreage by 1.94 acres of developed area.
Like I said, I talked to Warren
Yeah.
tonight.
Well, that's good.
Al Hodgson. So that's another commercial development application.
Yes. Well, from a timing perspective, I mean, I don't know if 1 month from now we can get through those last 3 things for shoreline zoning ordinance, and if we do, that would presumably wrap it up so that we can be back to 2 meetings per month to deal with other applications
Well,
coming in.
maybe through the summer months at least,
Right, exactly,
the building season.
right.
Are we going to see the subdivision application back? At
From
the-
Parish.
Yeah, from
That's
Parish.
on the agenda as well for April 5th.
That's on the agenda.
So we got, what,
Nothing else on the agenda.
3 or 4? I mean, usually it takes us a whole meeting to get through one commercial development.
I know.
I know. Yeah, to really help set expectations at this point, I'd say, whatever the last one that came in, let's not even have it on the agenda. Whatever the last one is.
The last one was Andy, one of Andy's. That was the last one that came in. I can go look. I
For the
think.
garage, for the repair garage.
No, he sent me a list of the 3.
Can you grab that?
Yeah.
This is just you guys can tell me if I'm going down the wrong path, but I want to set expectations for applicants.
Right.
And be fair to everybody that's spending their volunteer time, except for Nick, who we're paying overtime for this. Right? To do this as efficiently as possible. So I'm thinking last in the door, we move to the next meeting.
We'll see what we get. I can't remember everything, but.
Yeah. But it sounds like there's plenty.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Did you guys conclude that the boat shop had a complete application last meeting?
No, it didn't.
We
No,
didn't.
they didn't.
Well, I can't remember what he was missing.
Well, among other things, he didn't have any vegetative screening
Right.
and some other stuff.
He didn't know the footage of his driveway.
That's
Right.
We did that today, so.
He had some, so he
So
cut it
this is
down.
done. Eric and Joel Pelletier is done.
He said he had some, so he cut it down.
Right.
We got Paris Manson.
The other,
So
that's old
So
business.
hang on, guys, just a second.
I got a permit application down on Woodland Camp Road to jack up place slab. Oh, did you do a site visit down there?
We did do a site visit.
He and I
Two
did.
of us did,
So
yeah.
that's this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Kennebeth Road repair. That's all that's on there currently.
So that's all old business.
No, then you have.
Oh, okay, you've already put it on.
Yeah, I haven't received the applications yet, but these are the other things.
Right,
That's
San Marino.
commercial. That's commercial. And one of those, no. Which one? This is commercial. That's commercial. And the first one is just a shoreline permit.
Building permit.
Yeah, that's what.
These are the ones Andy told you to put on?
In that order.
Jay Rutherford is the auto repair.
Now, I don't know where this is other than on the town website, but the town website says if you have to have your application in the Thursday before the meeting,
Right.
or you're not on the agenda.
They know that.
Yeah.
They know that.
Yeah.
They got 3 weeks though, between now and the next.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, they know that. Which is
what, the 29th? April
I
29th?
believe so, yeah.
To be ready for April 5th.
Yep.
Right.
March 20th.
March 29th, I mean. Yeah, they know that.
So under new business, that's after taking care of old business, which is fairly full. There is one shoreline zone application and 2 commercial.
Correct.
So,
And one of them is just going to be asking for deny, so because it's the bright side.
right. I
Right.
don't know. Gary, what do you think? I mean,
I'm thinking you don't wanna put anything else on it.
but and do we scratch Wilson's? I don't know how we're gonna get to it.
Right. I'm just saying Wilson was.
We don't have an application yet.
Right.
I guess I'm expressing serious doubt.
Yeah, that we'll get through all of it.
I mean, Frank, my guess is, well, I think the Manson subdivision is gonna take a long time.
You do?
I do, because I think it's gonna be somewhat,
Oh.
it shouldn't be contentious, but I'm just concerned that, it may be, we'll have some disagreements with Mr. Manson, and he will with us.
Mhm.
I mean, just judging by past experience so far.
Mm-hmm.
That is possible.
So I'm guessing that's gonna be an hour,
Mhm.
or 3/4 of an hour.
That's the
Rosemary shouldn't take too much time, I don't
Okay,
think.
okay.
You, Peter?
I do not think.
Mr. Sadlowski, I don't know.
Kind of,
That could be half an hour.
no, it could be an hour.
And then I don't know anything about these others.
So just by that, 45 minutes, and counting, at least 30 minutes for that.
And-
That's an
Right now.
hour.
And Brightside Marina, we still have to go through the findings of fact to deny it.
I won't put minutes on there. That'll help.
Because you tabled it.
Yeah, we didn't
Right,
really
yeah,
go
we
through
tabled
it. That was just a preview meeting with Brightside, I remember.
No, they had an application before you. You tabled it.
Well,
They withdrew it, didn't they?
No,
No,
table.
tabled
Tabled
it.
it.
The issue came down to that, they were not gonna be able to meet the, well, first off, they hadn't gotten shoreline zoning approval, and secondly, they, because of that, and that would be difficult because they wouldn't meet the, minimum lot size requirements, in shoreline zoning, which are more stringent than the lot size, what's in the minimum lot size ordinance for town-wide. And so we couldn't approve it, presumably, or allegedly, or whatever, because they wouldn't meet the standard, the finding we have to make that they have met all other town ordinances.
right.
I don't think you can do this one this new commercial application for repair garage, I don't think you can. I don't think we do it.
No, I'll let Andy know that. That one was on really before these two. It's just I asked Andy
I know,
how would
but
you
this-
like. I asked Andy how he would like them to go in order since he was there. He said, "Well, that one's not going to take long."
Okay, well, tell him he gets 2 out of 3.
Okay, I'll let him know. I'll tell
Then
him.
decide.
Right.
Right. And I just want to be fair to all the
Well,
applicants,
right, I'll tell
as
him
well
that.
as the board.
His 3 was the last one to put on it, so he has to pick 2 that he wants to be on April 5th. I'll tell him that this one was on before his other 2, and I'll let him make the decision.
I mean, the follow-up question, of course, is,
Even then, it's gonna be.
are we gonna do shoreline zoning the second meeting in April if we got a waiting list of people to come in with permits?
Well, if the answer is no, that means we'd have to address it some other way. Does that mean a special meeting?
I know, we had set a schedule that the second meeting was gonna be for shoreline until we were done. I think we ought to stick to it.
I would prefer to stick to it.
Roger's correct, that's what we said last time.
And I think you can finish it in one meeting.
We probably don't, you.
So I'll tell Andy the one that he doesn't want to do. Go on May's first meeting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I hope this isn't the start of a long-term trend. Because 2 meetings a month, well, once we get done with shoreline zoning, it would be
Right.
fine, but even until then.
So, Any other updates? No, that's enough. Nick, anything? All set? Nothing else for me. Thanks, everybody. Let's call it a night. 9:31. Thank you, everybody.